The main thing that happened this month was a lot of turmoil. I don't really want to get into the details, but let's just say that a lot of important things broke down this month, and I had to pay for them. Well, since we're kind of coming out of Halloween, and very much a theme of that holiday is about fear, that's always been a major fear of mine, is even if I do everything right, I live very frugally, buy cheap food, turn off the lights, do all this other stuff, that something is gonna break or something bad is gonna happen, which is just gonna take all my money away. And that was something I kinda had to come to grips with. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not poor or anything. But when you have to spend a lot of money in a very short amount of time, it's very much like oh dear, I guess I'll have to go to the dollar menu from now on. However, the dollar menu doesn't exist anymore, so not even that is an option. But on the subject of fear, I will say, it wasn't as bad as it could have been. I mean, I was definitely freaking out, don't get me wrong, but I think it worked better this way because I was just freaking out for, say, a few days as opposed to just kind of cramming it all in there over the process of several weeks and then just having a mental breakdown a month or two later. So, yeah, it's good to be able to feel your emotions. But probably one of the other things it leads into as well is, well, not only fear of being unable to afford my monthly payments or bills, but the idea that I would be unable to keep transitioning. Thankfully, that didn't happen this time, but whenever it comes to traumatic events, I never really feel stronger from it. I just feel like I was just insanely lucky this time and wondering when the earth is going to open up and swallow me whole. But I digress. There was one great thing that happened this month, which kind of goes into the way that I am dressed. So, there was a local card shop nearby. They were hosting a Pokemon trading event. And because it was in the month of October, there was an impromptu costume contest. And while I have definitely made clear that I'm a bigger fan of Digimon, in terms of collecting the cards, I'm trying to get the first edition, or at least first edition adjacent, first 151 Pokemon, I believe. I'm slowly getting there, but whenever a trading event comes up, I like to go for it. Never know when you might find what you're looking for. And, well, the main reason I bring that up is, as you can see, this is a very mask-presenting costume. But yet, even through this, there was one person there that still addressed me as a woman. That made me feel really good. The idea that even if I do look masculine, people can still read me as female. Other than that, I do have like a few YouTube videos that I ran into. The first one was by a VTuber. I don't know what her name is, but it's kind of fun to watch some of these clips because they make like crazy little revelations and whatnot. And the subject of this one was saying that, on the whole, men are simpler. And the main explanation she was giving was the idea that if you buy a man a hamburger, he's going to be like, wow, free food? Well, thank you. And that the stereotype of the woman, it's going to be like, don't you know I'm vegan? Why would you do this to me? You just wasted your money. You don't even know the first thing about me. And the main point that was brought up in that video is the idea that, on the whole, men are hated. In fact, even in this modern pop culture, I feel like some have been compared to, say, smallpox. So if you show a man any sort of decency, like maybe a compliment here and there, that is gonna go a long way because it's just not something that happens. And well, having served my sentence as a man, shall we say, I could very much agree. I feel like if another man comes up to you and says, hey, I really like that shirt, most people are going to be like, what, are you gay or something? But yet if a woman goes up to another woman and says, hey, that's a pretty nice shirt, they're going to be like, oh, well, thank you very much. And I'm starting to think this is probably where the stereotype of trans women being unable to accept compliments comes from. The idea that, like, while they may have looked like a man, presented like a man, all this other stuff, society treated them like a man. Which, depending on where you are, can be seen as close to garbage. So all of a sudden people are like nice to you, they want to help you out. It's like, what is this? People have never done this for me before. What's going on? There was also this other one. There was a discussion of trans memes. But one of them I found interesting was a very common source of dysphoria is the shoulders. I don't get it. I mean, I know that there are like sweaters or maybe even dresses that like cut across this way to completely expose the shoulders. I'm not necessarily opposed to that, but it just feels like you get a very weird draft coming in if you were to wear something like that. But in terms of shoulders, I'm just kind of like, okay. And then one of the other popular things as well. This seems to be a bit of a rhetoric to try to dissuade people from transitioning. They'll say, like, archaeologists will discover your bones in another 200 years and they'll know that you really weren't a man or a woman or a non-binary or what have you. For me, I'm just like, I'm dead. Why do I care? And plus, on top of that, you know, I'm dead. It's not like I'm using my body or anything. I mean, if you can get some halfway decent organs or maybe skin or some other thing left, then yeah, have at it. I'm not using this meat vessel anymore. So if it can help somebody else to live, go for it. That's about all I have for this month. But there is one other subject that I want to talk about. Men are starting to interest me. And that makes me worried. I guess I'll just kind of go through all the moments of what I call straight panic. The first time, I guess there may have been a few times, like, during the first puberty where thoughts were just kind of colliding, where I'm just kind of like, okay, he kind of looks nice. I guess people would see him as, like, handsome or whatnot. But I don't really remember anything sticking. The first big thing I point to is the indie game known as Hades. The main character, I hope I'm saying his name right, it's Zagreus, I want to say? I was getting confused because not only did I very much love his very particular refined source of speaking, but I liked the idea that somehow he was buff, but not in like a veiny or grotesque kind of way, and, well, it's just a very odd sight to not see a man without chest hair. It definitely kind of, it's hard to necessarily say awakens something in me, but it just kind of went against what my typical idea of masculinity was. And I'm just kind of like, I kind of like this. Why do I like this? The next moment I can think of is from The Godfather. I'm not really sure if this was in the movie. I have yet to see it, but from what people tell me, the movie is a very accurate adaptation of the book. So it was during the daughter's wedding. I believe it was Santino who had a very graphic sex scene with one of the bridesmaids, and oh, I'm just trying to figure out how to phrase this. This is so embarrassing. Well, I kind of wanted a piece of that action. Like, I wanted to be the bridesmaid getting screwed. Oh, it's so cringy, but just the way it was described, I'm just kind of like, I kind of want that. it, it, and I don't know why, as every other context I've ever seen one of those things, usually in the locker room or whatnot, I'm just like, that's disgusting. Put it away. I don't want to see it. And I never really understood, what is it with like junior high boys and like wanting to draw that phallic symbol and put it everywhere? That it was just a very eye-opening experience. The next one also comes from literature with Gone with the Wind. The character of Rhett Butler, which is very interesting as the image he's kind of conjured with is very much that of stereotypical masculinity. The idea of like the guy that has like the shirt unbuttoned to here and there's just like puffs of chest hair, and I'm like, that's disgusting. But I think the thing I found most attractive about it is just the way he started treating Scarlett towards the end of the book. She just started having all kinds of nightmares about all the horrible stuff that she had to go through. And every so often, Rhett just kept waking her up, and it's just like, what's wrong, honey? And she's like, I'm worried I'm going to wake up one day and it's all going to be gone. And Rhett's just kind of like, well, I'll have to get you so used to living such a good life that you'll forget that you've ever had a bad life. And there was just something about that I found very attractive. The idea of somebody that wanted to step in as a shield to be able to protect someone from the outside world. I didn't really have a lot of that growing up. This other one came from a rather, well, it was a tier list of like a smash or pass for a lesbian couple. And there was this obscure animated movie called Fire and Ice. And just kind of going from the brief little clips I've seen here and there, I want to watch this movie. This looks like fun. But anyway, I guess one of the main villains or whatnot, the guy's name is Necron. And yeah, just like the main character from Hades. Okay, this guy looks attractive. And I think I've started to understand why is, well, I kind of admire him for more of his feminine characteristics. The idea he had like very long, luscious hair, very little to no hair on his body. The idea that he was buff but without being grotesque again. And then I saw his wife, Juliana. And I'm just kind of like, okay. I would be opposed to a menage a trois with these two. Wait a second, that's not the right term. Let's just say I'd like to be in the middle of a sandwich. I think that would be the best way to say it. Talking about sex has gotten a lot easier, but it still kind of makes me... And then this last one was a couple of random henchmen from this latest season of Sailor Moon I'm watching, Sailor Moon R. And, once again, I've really started to pick up on the idea that I kind of like the aesthetic of a man with more feminine aspects, which just seems kind of backwards, because when people talk about the idea of a femboy, for instance, aesthetically they look great, but I just can't get behind the fact that they have the very thing that I want to remove from my life. Then I guess within the same breath, I would have to mention trans women as well. Which, I don't know, I mean, I'm a little more on board for dating a trans woman than I would be dating a femboy. And I'm not entirely sure as to why. But I think one of the other big problems I would have is it's just not very often that I run into a lot of trans people that I could maybe form a romantic connection, but I feel like I would just be constantly like, hey, do you get like really happy when you put on this kind of clothes? What in the world causes the most euphoria or dysphoria for you? I would just kind of treat them more as an interviewer than a romantic partner. This is maybe something I can move past. But yeah, I wouldn't be opposed to dating a trans person. As for dating a trans man, hmm. Ah, I would probably guess not. Like I say, the idea of like male attraction is something that's very confusing to me. It's kind of coming up here and there. As for dating a cis guy, I'm just not comfortable with the idea. And I will fully admit that this definitely comes from misandry. I think the problem I have is I very much treat being male as like a prison sentence. And I get the feeling that this is probably the same thing for trans men whenever they talk to cis women. Just going specifically for straight men. The whole time I would just be trying to figure out how to be able to get them out of this prison that society has given for them. I want them to be able to explore their emotions, to be able to explore their more feminine side, to feel less like an unwanted person and more of somebody that belongs, that people want to be with. And then on top of that, there is also like my personal trauma. Maybe trauma is a bit too strong of a word, but it's just the idea that like these people would have the physical characteristics that I'm trying to get rid of. And the idea that I would have to be reminded that, well, there's still work for me to do in order to be what society as well as even myself would consider a woman. And on top of that, if I didn't like it on me, why would I like it on somebody else? Aesthetically, I just, aside from the examples that I've given, which I'm not really sure if all of them go for aesthetics, but I just don't really think men are really all that attractive. And maybe that's a bit of a societal thing. The idea that, like, women have to be the pretty ones, but men have to be rough and strong. Kind of the idea of, like, a Jeep versus, I don't know, a Ferrari. The idea of one is just meant for getting the job done. It doesn't look pretty, but it'll do everything you need to do. And the other one is something that has been artfully crafted. It took a very long time to be able to get together. It runs and it looks beautifully. But it's so expensive and very fragile that you'd be afraid to do a whole lot with it. Wow. I feel like I've kind of fulfilled a stereotype of a Saturday morning cartoon where someone's just like, you know, a good chick is just like a car. And, what do you mean by that? It just very much feels like that frame of thought. And I think the other big thing about dating men as well is the idea that this is something they've had programmed since they were born, and, well, I hate to admit it, but I've been very much programmed the same way as well. The idea that, like, you're not allowed to cry. Basically, you have to put up a giant stone face. And it's all the idea of, like, you want to cry, but you just have to do more and more push-ups to be able to get that weakness out of your body. And on top of that, I feel like on the whole, men are just more willing to assert their dominance. Even more so if they conceive themselves as having a small member. True, I mean, women can be this way as well, but from the few women I've had in my life, I found a lot more love and compassion that I just haven't really felt from men. I mean, I feel like there's always a lot of ball busting whenever you're with male groups, but when you're with female groups, it's just kind of like, yeah, just join the club. It's a lot less strenuous. You don't have to constantly prove your femininity to a group of women, but you have to constantly prove your masculinity to a group of men. Or maybe this is not how the real world works, and this is just the corrupted view that I've gotten from my years of experience. And I guess probably another thing as well is, I'll admit, I've been hurt by a lot of men in my life. I've been also hurt by a lot of trans women. And I've been hurt by a few non-binary people. But I guess it really just kind of comes down to the proportion. I mean, as of now, I've only really met 3 non-binary people, and, well, let's just say only one of them. I still talk with them. I found when it comes to talking with other trans women, I am very much the odd one out. It feels like a lot of trans women are just part of this monolith, and if you don't agree with even the smallest detail, that is when they all just kind of form into, like, Megatron and basically just want to wipe you off the face of the earth. For both, I'm willing to admit that I've just had a bad run, but the scars I have from those particular battles run deep, and it's gonna take a fair bit of love before I can start to try again. And I think another big thing that really kind of goes for the idea of liking women more is the idea that they were so forbidden to me when I was growing up. I mean, when I was like really young, I was allowed to like play with the other girls and whatnot. Nobody really cared, but once I get to like first or second grade, it's just like, if you start liking more girls than boys, then people just consider you gay. And even when you get older still, women just became absolutely terrifying. I was told that they were basically made out of glass, and if you broke them, you would be in some serious trouble, like potentially ruining the rest of your life trouble. It wasn't until after I started transitioning that I started to have some girlfriends, and I mean that in the platonic sense, not the romantic sense. And I could definitely say I felt a lot more camaraderie. I felt safer. I felt very much at home with a group of other women. And maybe this kind of speaks to the idea that I've been a trans woman this whole time, and only now do I feel like I'm with people that are like me. But of course, I could just be very biased because it was just nice to be recognized as a woman by other women, and hey, who knows a woman more than a woman does? So yeah, that was a bit of a tangent. Maybe even some would label it a TED Talk, but this is kind of my frame of reference, and it's interesting to kind of explore my sexuality. I mean, I've definitely been exploring my gender for a little while at this point. That's basically the reason I've been making these videos. But sexuality. It's weird how I have these few moments of straight panic, but then I'll just watch friends or whatever playing video games with hot anime women, and I'll just be like, and so, I'm sorry, I'm getting very distracted right now. How in the world does she bend over? Ooh. I guess if I am bi, I'm like maybe 80% female and like 20% male. This is by no means a confession video. It's just me kind of putting my thoughts out there as to what I found in exploring my sexuality. And maybe in a bizarre way, I might have helped you in your exploration as well. That surprisingly went a lot longer than I thought, so I think I will end it here. If there's anything else you'd like to talk about, feel free to leave a comment. And may I just stress that I do not want to discuss politics. I get enough of that in my daily life, especially being an election year. Let's just cut it out. Okay? I would very much appreciate that. Well, until next time, be yourself, no matter who that is.